Does microphone work?
No.
Now it works? Now it works. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Ed. I'm sorry, but we had a slight change of lineup, and I will apologize for this. First of all, to make sure that you're in the right place, this is a IETA ICC ERCST session on infrastructure needs for effective Article 6 operationalization of public-private dialogue. My name is Andrei Marcu. I'm the Executive Director of the European Roundtable on Climate Change. And I'm the negotiator that deals with Article 6 in the room. Unfortunately, the other negotiators have been called to active duty because there's been an Article 6 session, the first Article 6 session that's been put at 3. I made an executive decision that you guys are more important than the other guys, so I decided to stay here with you. I hope you appreciate that. And come on, I mean, it is the first day of COP, we can afford to do that. No, but seriously speaking, it's important. This session is important. It is in the first day, and we had a number of discussion over the last 4 or 5 months following the Glasgow COP on how to operationalize Article 6. You know, we knew how to operationalize the Kyoto Protocol. It was kind of, you know, I would call it simple and stupid because it's a giant cap and trade scheme. We understood how that worked. There was an ITL. Things made sense. We could understand it very easily. Now, somebody made a whole mess out of this in terms of markets, because this is complicated. It's not as simple as the Kyoto Protocol. It has certainly advantages. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to the deal. But nevertheless, it is a much more complicated story, and much more complicated for many, many reasons that I will not go into it. But primarily now, we are here to discuss about how to put in place the infrastructure. And I will not get you through the old ugliness of the discussion of how the infrastructure debate is evolving right now somewhere else in another room, in the room Genf. But clearly there is a need to understand how the reporting, the transparency, and the infrastructure work together, how these registries, whether they have access to a registry or they have a registry, how the database, how the CARP, or the whole thing, how they work together. And we have here a group of people that have thought about this quite deeply. Some of them have actually started to take action and putting into place some very practical application. There are others that have been involved in negotiating deals and trying to understand how, and understand or beginning to understand what is needed to make those deals operational in terms of infrastructure. So we will listen to what we initially conceived very much as a public-private partnership. I said the public part of the partnership has kind of not been here because of the Article 6 session, but nevertheless we have a very good representation. The one representation from the government is Rui Yun Gan, who's the senior manager at the National Climate Change Secretariat in the Prime Minister's office in Singapore. Singapore has been very active, has taken the lead, has thought about this for a long time. And in typical Singaporean manner, they then decided to act, and they will decide to act, they act in a very serious way. Then we have Jacqueline Jakob, who is the Director of International Relations at KliK Foundation. KliK Foundation in Switzerland has been doing deals and working with the Swiss government in operationalizing a number of deals that are important in different countries, and you'll hear about them, and the conclusion that they're beginning to reach in terms of what is needed in terms of infrastructure. Ingo Puhl is the co-founder and managing director of Southeast Asia of South Pole. South Pole, I mean, for those of you that have been around for a while, must know South Pole has been one of the long-term survivor of this business. So it's good to see you around, Ingo. And last but not least, talking about a survivor, yet another survivor, Neil Cohn is the global head of markets and sustainability at the Chia network. I've known Neil. It was his NatSource hat and many other hats over the years. So it's a pleasure that we get together together again after all these years. But let's get now with the on with the program. Again, we appreciate you taking the time. It is kind of the first day, so the people are still finding their feet, and the discussion is still going around. We're very sorry that some of the negotiators are not here, but it may well be that at some point during the next 2 weeks we may be able to reconvene in some more informal fashion, and as people have learned a bit more about that, they will have learned how this works. I will start then. We'll start with Rui. You come in first, Rui, to bat, and start with your presentation, and then we'll go on in the order that I mentioned, Jacqueline and Ingo and Neil. I would be happy to answer questions to the degree that I can. I am a negotiator in Article 6 for PNG, but again, I chair this meeting, so it's not appropriate really for me to kind of start answering questions. If I can answer question, I'll be happy to answer what I can. You have to take it with a caveat. Anything I tell you is a personal opinion, and anything that any of the other negotiators would have told you would also be personal opinions, because they are in the process of getting to the guts of the infrastructure, and as such, nobody has the real answers. Everybody thinks they have the answer. The only thing that I can tell you is the sessions that we've seen is that there is a convergence, that it is very much about making the infrastructure operational, and there's less desire to get into very much into the the typical UNCCC sessions where people get and start negotiating and have contradictory discussion that last days and nights. It looks to be the atmosphere seems to be fairly cooperative, and there are differences of views on certain things, but there are no historical difference of views. It's not like we want A and you guys want B, and we're on completely different pages. It's different on interpretations. What is a register? Do we need to have national registry, or you have to access to registry? In the end, you can have both if you wanted to at the limit. What is the role? How do you communicate between the national registry and the Article 6.4 registry? These are discussions, but as you can see from what I'm explaining to you, most of them are of a nature that is more technical. If you want more political issues that they are getting into, it's not necessarily infrastructure, but when you do the technical review teams, when they get into review, what do they review for? That's the kind of more political discussion. If you want to do do you do a checklist, or do you go and do a qualitative check for what has been submitted? So that's as political as this discussion will get here. So it may be, for those of you who are techies, it's going to be interesting. For those of you who are political, it's probably less interesting as the time will go by. But first, I'll pass it on to Ray.
Okay. How do I do the slide?
Now that's a very good. She'll change. Is that okay? Are you comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's okay as long as I can see it from here.
Well, that's another challenge.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the very kind introduction of Singapore as well as my agency. So I'm Ray from the National Climate Change Secretariat. So my role primarily focus on carbon pricing and carbon markets. So today I will share a bit more about our thinking on registries for international transfer under Article 6.2. So perhaps next slide, please. So for the start is that we need to understand what is Article 6.2. It's a decentralized framework under the Article 6 guidance. So registry used for Article 6.2 should facilitate market participation and support environmental integrity. So given there is a decentralized framework, paragraph 29 of Decision 2 CMA3 actually states that each participating party shall have access to a registry for the purpose of tracking. So registries are actually a key enabler for market participation. And given the integral role of the registry in tracking the flow of IPMOs, which is carbon credits that are Article 6 compliant, transparency of registry is actually a key component to ensure the environmental integrity. Yeah, next slide, please. So, at least in our thinking, there are currently two main options for registry arrangement. So these are the archetypes that participating parties want to have full control of their IPMOs through their own national Article 6 registries or international registry. So model 1 is leveraging national carbon offset program to issue mitigation outcomes of carbon credits in a more layman term. So under model 1, it assumes some registry is used for the national program and the host party. And there are, of course, sub model like A, which is for use towards NDC, that's for countries. B is for use towards other international purposes or other purposes. That's for corporates as well as for example, CORSIA use. And for model 2 is actually what we're going to focus today on, which is a public and private partnership, where we leverage voluntary carbon offset programs to issue the MOs. And of course, it's A and B for use towards NDC or for use towards other purposes. Just a note here is that transaction between market participants can happen with or without market intermediaries. It could be a direct trade or it could be going through exchanges or even marketplace. So no new asset classes are generated in either model. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is model 1, which is very streamlined and it's lower risk, but may not be applicable to most because not everyone have a national program. So, but I will focus on the next slide, which is the key point.
You want to sit here? Maybe
Yeah.
it's easier for you. I think that's kind of makes sense.
Okay. Sorry about it.
No, that makes more sense.
Okay, yeah, at least I know what I'm presenting now. Yeah. Yeah, given that this chart is very complex here, so to give an overview is that Model 2 actually leverages existing mechanism and infrastructure of voluntary programs such as Gold Standard, VERA, and others. This will actually minimize costs and maximize access, for example, reducing barrier of entry for participating parties. So for one, so I will run through the whole flow of things. So for one, the carbon credits will actually be issued in a carbon credit program registry such as those in Gold Standard and VERA with a label indicating corresponding adjustment pre-authorized. This is only if host party provided the letter of authorization beforehand. And thereafter, the project developer will request the host party to authorize and effect the first transfer process, which is the corresponding adjustment process under the Article 6.2 guidance. And thereafter, the host party registry will complete the first transfer process and list and cancel the IPMOs in the registry. And concurrently, the program registry will update the MOs to become IPMOs and indicate them as correspondingly adjusted. Just two small points to note, subsequent transaction will actually happen in the program registry. It won't happen in the host party registry to ensure that there's only one single source of truth. And the note number 2 is that the host party registry can refer to national registry or international registry under Article 6.2 that is provided for by the UNFCCC Secretariat. So under the Model 2A, which is for use towards NDC, the user, it will first, the program registry will cancel the IPMOs once they are transferred into another registry, and then the user party registry will then accept the transfer from the program registry by listing the IPMOs in its registry. And subsequently, for achievement of NDC, the IPMOs will be retired, and they will inform the host party registry of the transfer and the use. So, and this will ensure that there's a proper tracking of the IPMOs from the very start to the very end. And then, of course, the Model 2B is where the corporate companies come in, such as airlines and companies. They can claim the use towards other international purposes by requesting IPMOs to be retired. Thereafter, program registry will retire and inform the host party registry. However, I do note that this is not something that is done right now. There's no proper arrangement being done. And with a proper arrangement being set up, it could actually reduce the cost and maximize participation. So with these options for registry arrangement, that's why we will need some level of convergence to ensure environmental integrity. So to enhance the effectiveness and integrity of the framework, we need to streamline and converge the registry arrangement into a few archetypes based on ensure proper tracking and reporting, ensure double counting is avoided. This includes double insurance and double claiming. And lastly, minimize the cost and barriers of participation while maximizing participation to advance global climate action and ambition by allowing more to take part in this mechanism. And with regard to Model 2, given the numerous voluntary offset programs out there with different processes and practices, parties, or rather countries, should converge on the optimal arrangement for the programs, such that the programs can then align their registry to this arrangement, and countries could actually take advantage of it. Convergence will also increase the likelihood that most transactions are properly tracked, accounted, and reported to safeguard the integrity of the framework. That said, coordination may not be sufficient to avoid double counting. Therefore, safeguards and further study will actually be required. So firstly is that given the number of actors involved in the life cycle of an IPMO, especially in Model 2, there are actually multiple points of potential failure in which double counting could occur intentionally or unintentionally, especially if registries, the CUP, the centralized accounting platform under the Article 6, and Article 6 database do not have data and visibilities of all IPMOs and MO transactions. So over here, MO, we are referring to voluntary carbon credits, given that there could be a potential of double issuance in the same area, same project, just that one is being tracked under IPMOs under Article 6, while in the VCM is not properly tracked, and you are issuing it two programs. There's a possibility of double issuance there. So there are some possible mechanisms for safeguards. These include party can put in place relevant safeguards during the review process. This is at the end stage. However, we should also focus a bit more on the upstream, which is the development of a global market infrastructure that enhances the transparency of the carbon markets by linking registry. So this is actually the climate warehouse idea that World Bank has initiated, and IETA and Singapore has been advancing it together with World Bank. I think Neil will talk about it later on. So I won't delve into the technical details of this climate warehouse. So a possible way ahead is that maybe the Secretariat could actually study on the learning by doing thus far, so the different registry arrangement with a view of recommending a registry arrangement between National Registry, International Registry, Article 6.4 Registry, and even the Voluntary Carbon Credit Program Registry for IPMOs issued under 6.4, and also the Article 6.4 Registry. So ideally, it should not have a very different arrangement from the one in 6.4 to avoid complex setup that could lead to cost increase. And of course, we are talking about involving private sector now. So the views from observer and non-parties could also be incorporated, and they are very important given that project developers, the voluntary carbon credits market, the market intermediaries, they are all from a private sector. So we will definitely have to work on these public and private partnerships. Yep, I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that gives you this was a vision of the different models and what some of the thinking that exists today of how the infrastructure would work, and a little bit of the flow of information and the flow of work that could emerge under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Again, as I think that Rui has mentioned, this is a Singaporean vision. I think it's not outside the mainstream, but there's always going to be different quirks, and people will see different angles, certain things. You can see him in 2 weeks or in 6 months, and you'll find out that he was right or wrong. Now, next is Jacqueline Jakob, the Director of International Relations at the KliK Foundation. KliK Foundation has also been around for a while. You want to sit there?
Yeah,
You'll sit there. And they have been engaged now in doing transactions with a number of countries. So they are beginning to get a sense of what are the infrastructure needs and how this would work from their point of view. Again, there's going to be particularities for different countries. Probably not going to be 100% unique, coherent among all countries, but it's very interesting to hear what from your point of view, what you've seen. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrei. Actually, I brought along some gifts for you, but due to COVID, I'm not allowed to put them somewhere and let you take them. So if anybody's interested in a little leaflet with QR codes where you'll find more information, this is the one you can have if you come up to see me. And if you want to know what KliK Foundation does in only a few words, it's on this flyer, and the essence is we buy ITMOs. Come to see me and get these two little gifts. Corona
and if you have
secure.
if you had ITMOs to sell, I mean, this is the person.
Exactly. Well, I don't dare to hope that you have ITMOs. If so, you definitely have to come to see me. Okay, so Swiss law requires producers and importers of fossil fuels to compensate part of the emissions resulting from the release of the fossil fuels with climate protection programs. KliK, Foundation KliK, is the entity that fulfills this obligation on behalf of the fossil fuel importers. KliK supports climate protection programs, finances the development to a certain extent, and submits and buys the mitigation outcomes and submits these international attestations to Swiss authorities. And then they are ITMOs. KliK Foundation is around since a few years, as Andrei said. KliK Foundation was founded in 2013 by Swiss law. However, the compensation could only take place domestically within Switzerland, and it's only now since January 2022 that KliK Foundations may also compensate abroad. That's why the international team within KliK Foundation has grown from Misha Klaassen as being the one and only for years, to be 2 Mishas for the past 2 years, to being now 6 persons since February, March of this year. So we are a brand new team, 300% bigger than we were before, and you see my colleagues in the back. The bilateral implementation agreements between Switzerland and partner countries, and you can see it on this little leaflet, which are the partner countries. You cannot read it here. It's Dominica, Vanuatu, Ghana, Senegal, Peru, and Georgia. And very soon there will be Thailand, and we do hope sincerely during this year there will be other bilateral implementation agreements concluded. The terms of the bilateral cooperation agreements govern the recognition and the calculations of the ITMO between the two countries, in the two countries. They govern for minimal quality standards, and they touch upon technical and administrative aspects. So for this session, actually quite important texts to read. They established a sort of an infrastructure between these two countries in question. Of course, in the preamble, there is the transparency issue noted, the avoidance of double counting, ensuring environmental integrity, the support of sustainable development, and enshrining also the human rights. Somebody said, my predecessor, my 2 pre-speakers said, it's a terribly complicated matter. Somebody messed it up, said Andrei. And also the presentation of Model 2, your introductory words really were, ooh, it's very complicated. And it is, but I try to make it easy. What do we do in Switzerland? As I mentioned before, and I stress the words, KliK Foundation submits international attestations. So the units are then deleted and reissued, but they are not transferred within this or by the Swiss National Registry. In our view, a transfer registry is not an absolute necessity. For us, the Swiss National Register is sufficient for the time being. However, national registries have to ensure that there is no double counting, and this is only the case if all activities and reductions are in the national registry, which comes back to your Model 1 and Model 2. The UNFCCC surrounding should encourage parties and mechanisms to make sure that security traceability and immutability are maintained to avoid manipulation and data conflicts. The UN registry is for reporting only, pledge and review. However, a unique ID must remain unchanged and unambiguous across all transfers via different registries. That's how much I want to say with regard to the registries. However, the UN system the infrastructure provided by the UN system has to make sure manipulation and data conflict are prevented. They have also, in addition, they also have to make sure that investment security for market participants is given. We fear that the latency period of up to 3 years between authorization by the governments and the publication and recognition by the UN could last up to 3 years. That's a lot. For an investor, that's a time frame which is out of his horizon, his or her horizon. In addition, stability and reliability have to be provided by the UN framework. The scope and the timing of the technical expert review is important. It should be as early as possible because investors should have as quick as possible certainty about their investment. And maybe this could be solved with a provisional report as soon as possible, which could then be confirmed later on. Of course, it is important to have the national framework in place, and I'm very proud to tell you here that Switzerland has its national framework in place since about 2 weeks. It's called Vollzugsmitteilung. I don't know the English word of and this is the scheme which is in the Vollzugsmitteilung. You have above, you have the Swiss body, the Swiss entity, the FÖN, the BAFU, and below you have the partner country. And the important point is about here. The verified monitoring report. KliK then submits the international attestations to the Swiss authorities. And for every ITMO recognized as an international attestation, it will be recorded in the Swiss registry. Last week, we were in Ghana, and a few weeks before, we were in Senegal. With both countries, there are bilateral agreements with Switzerland existing. And we had meetings with the business sector, and we tried to do a pitch. As I said in the beginning, we want to buy ITMOs. If you have any ITMOs, please show them to me. We want to buy them. And it's very difficult to explain to business sectors what is an ITMO and how can you do it. So for the business sector, it is very important to have clarity on national eligibility criteria. Be it a positive list or a white list, the sectors have to be on it, the project technologies should be known, and it should be clarity about the vintages of emission. A very important issue is also to know whether the activities would be recognized, authorized for use towards an NDC. And as I said, the policy framework in both countries have to be in place, because without the structures and procedures known, we cannot proceed to do the validation and the proper authorization. Therefore, for a proper authorization, and I look towards my colleague Ingo, a model of letter of authorization to streamline and standardize the process would be very helpful to make A6 activities up and running. Private investors want clarity, credible mitigation outcomes in their hands because that's their value, and the simpler, the better. This is my end. Infrastructure does not yet create the market. The investors who understand clarity and reliability, they create the demand, and there is a supply. And if the demand is higher than the supply, prices will rise. And private sector will then make the infrastructure very, very quickly, and so the market will emerge. Instead of creating a Rolls-Royce in the infrastructure, which might take another 5 to 10 years until the Rolls-Royce is built, let us start with a smart little smart right away and now. I heard my course, my pre-speaker, learning by doing. Let's take the driver's seat in the smart and roll off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I think that Switzerland is bringing a smart. I'm not sure Singapore is building, but I think is building. I mean, the way I understand Switzerland is more into bilateral type of trade. I think Singapore is looking more at building a hub, or at least notionally. So it's different, a little bit of emerging in different ways with different interests. Why don't you come over, Ingo, now? No, I think you should stay on and just, okay. I think, why don't you guys stay here? I mean, rather than...
If you don't have any slides, I may, otherwise...
No. So, Ingo, you also have been in this business in the Kyoto Protocol. You know how the Kyoto Protocol worked. Again, it was simple and easy to understand. There's some complexity emerging from different models and different intent of different parties, how they want to behave in the market and what they want to do. So go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here. I would like to start with repeating something that Jacqueline just said. Learning by doing is the way to go. And I'm normally based in Thailand, and we've been also involved in helping an agreement, a bilateral agreement between Thailand and Switzerland that is kind of like, on a very good road, I think. And what I want to share is, in practice, like everything is, in theory is one thing and in practice is another. So on this journey to an agreement, Thailand, and this is, I think, typically, I think, for like a more, like if I can call it more like an Asian approach to be very thorough, like to say, okay, we want to do something. And if we are doing this, let's not just do a pilot, but let's create a real framework. So very soon, Thailand discovered that if to engage in an Article 6 transaction and to protect, to provide integrity, just looking at carbon credits and registry with a focus on ITMOs is not enough. Because the same project that might deliver an emission reduction that becomes an ITMO might also be a project that creates a carbon credit that's traded in a domestic market, or that's traded in a voluntary market, or that's retired domestically, or that goes into CORSIA. No? So you have this, it's the same pool of carbon credits, no? And if you want to provide integrity, you have to cover all of it. No? And so as a result of that, Thailand has actually created quite a comprehensive regulatory framework, which is not yet into force, but it's in very advanced drafts, I think that's fair to say, no? Or maybe even beyond that, no? To address all of that for the creation of a domestic carbon market, for the interaction of ITMO markets with non-ITMO markets. No? And there are some very powerful conclusions coming from that. We've been kind of like also instrumental in helping that, because of course what we want to see as South Pole is we know there's an interest by a wide variety of players to invest into climate action in Thailand, in the corporate sector, as part of a company's net zero journey. Now you have the voluntary market. You have a country like Japan, which is very much driven by exporting clean tech and very integrating their clean tech engagement with emission reductions. You have maybe a country like Singapore, which is interested in trade and finance, plus, of course, a very interesting new compliance system, very similar like Switzerland, but actually leaving the responsibility to procure units with the private sector and not through an agency, but otherwise it's kind of like a similar idea. So you have all of these things, and how do you do that? And the conclusion of all of that is that the country first needs to be in control to safeguard environmental integrity. And this is done through authorization rules. So a strong authorization framework that works on two levels. First is authorization of projects to create carbon credits for different allowed uses. No? So first, there could be a project that says we only grant authorization for this project to create carbon credits under a domestic system. Or it could be, here's a project that where a portion of the carbon credits might be authorized for international transfer under a bilateral agreement, which also means that the only country to which those MOs might be exported to are the partner country. So it's like a bilateral ITMO, that a carbon credit that has no value outside that partner country, for example, right? Or there could be carbon credits that are permitted use for everything, like a very generic unit. So, and this is all done through authorization, first on a project level, and then on a secondary step, authorization on the unit level. That means, if a project creates 100 units, the authorization for an international transfer to another country might only be granted to 40% of those units. That means every carbon credit will need to be tagged in terms of what is its allowed use. Now, this is actually, we talked a lot about complexity, but this is where it gets really, really elegant in my point of view, because we have now very simple means. Like, I don't know who of you have seen Harry Potter, and the students who basically put on a sorting hat, like when they come to school, it's like putting on a sorting hat, no? Like for every project, where am I allowed to go with this? No? And once we have that, after that, it becomes very simple. But in terms of execution, there is one very clear thing, and this is now actually what Jacqueline talked about in terms of the convergence, that a decentralized registry system is needed that has interoperationality so that these units and these different governance systems can actually see each other. No? And even going a step further, there might be a real implication on the structure of carbon markets in the future. It might be because the Thai regulation will allow for the registry of a Vera-issued VCU in a Thai registry, which means even for carbon standards, there might be a separation of their different roles, governance entity of issuance, and manager of a registry system. Though there could be a future even where Vera can see all of its VCUs, but not in its central registry, but in these decentralized registry that receive throughout. No? And so we need this structure, like maybe that's the key story. We need this decentralized governance structure to be able to let country exercise their authority over the permitting of the use of the carbon credits that are generated in its countries. A wonderful side aspect of that is even a non-additional carbon credit from a large solar installation is now, it's a carbon credit, it's an emission reduction. But what we have to do is to say, you, international private sector, you cannot use the emission reduction to meet a net zero target, it's not additional, but why not allow a domestic entity in that country to use this as part of their NDC compliance obligation? There's nothing about additionality that is required, right? So we can use permitted use as a new key criteria in how we organize this. No? And it makes it very simple to say, this is a low-hanging fruit. Let's use it for domestic purposes to keep the cost of compliance for our national entities low. And this is a highly innovative project that requires a lot of international support. And those are the units that will allow for export or for these other uses, right? So authorization and permitted use becomes a very nice new criteria to actually manage carbon markets, in my view, and a decentralized registry system just might be the right vehicle to get this done and allow everybody who wants to invest in climate action to invest in climate action, and in a way that's highly integrated.
Thanks, Ingo. Last but not least, Harry Potter. Now start by explaining what is Shia networks, because I think I know what it is, but I think these folks are very, very fascinated by how this works and what the role that you're playing in this market.
Yeah, okay, I forgot my sorting hat, but we don't have magic, we have really good technology. And it is, I'll have to say this, and Jacqueline, I totally agree with you. We need a smart car. I think we built a Tesla. And that was really based on foresight and tremendous work by the World Bank, by what Chandra Sekarsina and the crew, actually Gemma Torres is here now, and she's running this program in the Climate Warehouse, and it works. And it's really built on what Ingo was saying, the need for decentralization. Really what the Paris Agreement was negotiated to do is to enable the parties to have autonomy, but to create a system that was fully trusted, that did not have double claims or double counting, any of the issues that would really cause an erosion of trust in the markets and potential for non-compliance or for, is this microphone breaking?
No,
It's working? It's my voice?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
a long week
It's
already.
emotional. Go ahead.
It's terribly emotional, guys. No, seriously, actually, let me just say one thing. I think all of us here, we've been in this for 25 years, since like COP3. So when we came, I came from trading, and when I knew that there was flexible mechanisms, we wanted to come and check it out. What could we do? How could we actually do something that was useful with our finance and commodity and trading skills? And it's been great to be on this mission. And Carbon 1.0 did a lot of really great things, but we had limitations. Only very large projects were possible. We had the ITL, which was functional, and it worked according to what the Kyoto Protocol needed. But now we have a different agreement and a different construct, and the ability to create projects that have more impact, that can be non-contiguous and meaningful, because now we have the technology. And as you look at these technologies, we must always recognize that anything that's truly an advanced technology must be advanced for the biosphere, must be advanced for society. If it's not, Bitcoin, wow, really cool technology, decentralized. It was killing our biosphere, and it's causing concentrated wealth in a bad way. Elegant, wonderful solutions, but has this downside. Go back and figure it out. Ethereum had a great idea. We're using processing power. Let's go and put in smart contracts. Great concept. But again, to get more adoption, they use code that's very insecure. They also stuck with this energy system. We needed to find something better. So some of the people that have been involved in these technologies for many years in blockchain went back and said, we need to do better. We need to go back and, based on what we've seen, based on what is good in decentralization, try to find something that's truly inclusive. Decentralization does not mean disintermediation. Decentralization, which is the premise of what we're looking at, means inclusion. It means creating a level playing field so all countries and all parties can start to participate in a way that we did not have in Kyoto. Kyoto was, it was Annex 1 countries, and it was countries that were waiting to find how to be helped. Now we're all participants, and we all should have the ability to use these tools in a way that actually is enabling. So I'm going to go and say what Chia did. Chia is a very well thought out blockchain. Instead of having hundreds of power plants that are creating these hashes for the one lucky hash that creates the next block, all of our hashes, every hash is important, is saved. Every hash goes on a hard drive. We have over 200,000 hashes all over the developing world. A 15-year-old laptop or a $75 Raspberry Pi computer can run Chia, and it is therefore the most secure. The language was recreated to be sandboxed. It's a very old functional language, Lisp, and the way it works is incredibly successful. It was created by Bram Cohn, the same person who created BitTorrent. The World Bank was looking for a public blockchain, something that was in the ethos of the Paris Agreement. And I actually was not working for Chia, but I had found it after looking at blockchains for many years, and I suggested it. And it was clear that it was a better fit. So the Climate Warehouse and the third simulation was based on the Chia network and what they created. What we've done, I'm proud of. I'm actually going to show a video, if I can, of what the World Bank has done. I can show a couple slides, but I don't want to take too much time. But I think you'll start to see why we do have systems that work. It's just technology, it's software. It shouldn't be political. If it works and it enables, and it's within the ethos of what we're trying to achieve, then we should try to adopt it. If something's better, as we talked about, if we have a smart car, but somebody comes out with a better version of an engine, let's change it. Well, let's look for that, and let's move. But right now, I think what Bram has created, this proof of space and time, this ability to have a very secure Nakamoto consensus, one that will not get hacked, one that is actually inclusive and not causing damage. let's use that. If something comes along better, this is all open source. This is not for profit. Everything Chia has done has been free and is a gift because this is within our ethos. It's really important. So, okay, how do I work this thing? Thanks. This is 25 years. I need glasses. That's not it. Oh, let's try this. You know what it is? It's the video.
It's the video.
Andrei, do we have the video? Oh, they have the video.
Just a video.
I could do the video. I could show slides. We could do a dance. We could. Oh, I'll show the slides. We'll get to the video. Okay. Or do we have a video?
Under the Paris Agreement, countries can work together to reach their climate commitments through climate markets. It's estimated that by 2030, climate markets could save $250 billion per year in implementing climate actions, or increase the volume of emissions removed by 5 gigatons of CO2 per year. However, countries' transactions of climate assets will only lead to a global reduction in greenhouse gas emissions if those reductions are real and credible. Demonstrating this is complicated by the decentralized bottom-up spirit of the Paris Agreement, which could lead to heterogeneous climate markets with different governance rules and technology systems. Currently, there are a variety of information systems that countries use, ranging from basic spreadsheets to sophisticated registries to store information on climate activities and assets. It's important to improve upon these systems to increase integrity and trust. A key challenge for the development of climate markets is standardizing and interconnecting registry systems. The World Bank's Climate Warehouse initiative seeks to address this challenge. The Climate Warehouse was launched to be a public good metadata layer that reflects the information from connected registries using a standardized data model, making registry data easily available and traceable. The World Bank also developed a productized registry system for countries to use that is compatible with the Climate Warehouse. How does the Climate Warehouse work? The Climate Warehouse uses blockchain technology to connect registry systems, reflect registry data, and trace changes to the registry data. Registry operators can connect using blockchain nodes, establishing a peer-to-peer network for sharing data. If an operator makes changes to the information in their registry, the change is recorded and broadcasted to the network of connected systems. The network records the change, and the information is added to a new block. The blocks added to the chain are time-stamped and immutable and cannot be changed retroactively, so users can trust that the data is valid and any approved data updates are traceable. The Climate Warehouse will be operationalized in 2022. In December 2021, the World Bank completed the second simulation phase with more than 40 stakeholders, including country registry operators, independent certification standards, multilateral institutions, and industry partners. The simulation participants could upload their registry data to the Climate Warehouse through an auxiliary application or an API connection. Participants could view information from the connected registries and trace any changes to the data. The testing and simulation improved understanding of peer-to-peer integration across decentralized registry systems and minimum data and technical requirements. In January 2022, the World Bank initiated the third and final simulation phase in collaboration with Chia network to run the Climate Warehouse on a public, permissionless blockchain with wider accessibility, enhanced security, and lower environmental impact. Previously, the Climate Warehouse was tested on Ethereum, Hyperledger platform, and blockchain as a service with Kaleido. The World Bank remains open to work with other platforms on a similar basis. The third version of the Climate Warehouse prototype is open source, interoperable, and expected to be the operational version that will be rolled out by the end of 2022. The governance structure of the operational climate warehouse was developed through a public consultation convened by the International Emissions Trading Association, the World Bank, and the Government of Singapore, which involved more than 70 organisations. The Climate Warehouse initiative focuses on the potential of blockchain technology for sharing and tracking climate markets data across registry systems. Blockchain technology can help build trust and enhance transparency in decentralised climate markets, and ultimately raise the ambition of international climate action. To learn more about the Climate Warehouse, please visit our website at www.theclimatewarehouse.org.
Now you know what the Chia networks is.
Does that help?
Neil,
No,
Neil, go ahead.
I did want to say that. So Gemma Torres Vivas is in the room, and Gemma, if anybody was interested in being part of the simulation in stage 4 of it, they're in the phase 4. They're open and looking for other parties that want to participate. I'll just say that look, blockchain is not the ultimate panacea. It's been used inappropriately before. You know, blockchain had been meant to often obfuscate and anonymize and enable nefarious activities. And as I said, you know, blockchain needs to be better. It needs to really work with the authorities, and that's been our ethos from the beginning. And it's really an honor to be able to bring this back, you know, coming from the climate community, bringing this back to do this. And yeah, I hope we get the chance. And there's things that we can do. While blockchain is permissionless, the data on the Climate Warehouse, I think it's important to note, all of the data for the parties can either be confidential on the data itself, even though it's publicly verified. The data itself can be confidential. The writing could be to the parties that they're giving it to. It's all on a permissioned basis, and that's really highly unique. And honestly, it was created for the World Bank, but we're now finding many other areas where it needs to be used, and it's pretty exciting. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether the World Bank team wants to say anything on this, but I'm sure that they will be available around, I think, next couple of days if anybody has further questions. But Rui, I think you should come here because it's, you know, you're having been punished to sit there.
I can grab a chair. It's okay, I sit there.
Well, there's a chair right there. There. Okay, so now we got the whole team here. Now, we're opening this to questions and comments, and we're happy to, I'll try to answer anything I can on Article 6, but again, it's all hypothetical because there's a bunch of people kind of in another room doing this stuff right now. I should be joining them. But, we are having people here with a lot of experience and in terms of doing transactions, people that are getting involved in creating infrastructure. So it's a good opportunity for you to interact and ask questions and provide comments. So who's going to go first? You can't be, Giza.
I'll have a quick question. Thank you, Andrei.
You are Giza Martens.
Yes, I am. Oh.
To my recollection.
Yeah, it's still me. I have a quick question. This is becoming incredibly challenging in terms of infrastructure for countries that during Carbon 1.0 we're not able to participate, sometimes not by lack of opportunities to do so. So any recommendations, any hubbing, so to take the Singaporean approach or emerging solutions to facilitate the participation of those that will have challenges in establishing the infrastructure to participate? Thanks.
Well, you want to start, Ingo, and then, or you're closer to the mic. You want to
I'll just grab it. I'll just say this, that the World Bank, the Climate Warehouse is an auxiliary app, which is basically a very simple registry. So very quickly, you'll be up and running on a registry. the way that the system can work and the additional infrastructure that the bank is looking to provide, together with private sector, it's very open source. The goal is to enable smaller countries that need the help to rise up. I am more than willing. Please reach out to me, neil@shia.net, and the World Bank people, and we will help. That's our goal. And the goal is really that no country should be left behind. We are starting with climate change because it's so critical, but ultimately what this should do is it really does lead to a truly more decentralized level, equal system for finance. So we lead the way because climate is a pain point, but I really believe we're creating something that's very positive here, and we'll continue to help. Thank you. Go ahead, Ingo.
Just to add 2 points. It's not just the registries that are these digital technology hubs in the market. The whole carbon market is becoming digital, is driven by technology, with the benefit that human capacity, or often the lack thereof, is replaced by technology in a very scalable, in a very cost-effective way. So that will help us tremendously going forward. And secondly, and this is a repeat from Carbon Market 1.0, nothing builds better capacity than deals. So as a country, I would make a very strong case to look at carbon markets not as a tool for compliance with some target, but as a means to drive investment into your priority sectors for which you want to have this transition to the low carbon economy. It's an investment framework. And I think if you focus on that, and if you create an investment framework that will generate deals, and deal will drive capacity, which will be easily deployable because it's based on digital, it's all you have to do is download a software on a computer, and you have the capacity that you need to play. So that is that brighter future, and the more scalable future.
I'll go to Jacqueline, but then Chandra Shekhar Senior from the World Bank has also joined us.
Where to start? I think we talk now about infrastructure, and we mean registry, and I think there's a lot more. And the problem is, it's before, in a timeline, it's before the registry comes into the game. We need to have things to be done. And I agree with Ingo. The best capacity building is involving people and doing it. And I've told you, we were in Senegal and in Ghana recently, and tried to get business community involved. We really have to start with A and B to talk about these issues. We cannot talk like we do here now. We have to start from scratch. So it's like we want to buy eggs, but there is no egg and there is no chicken, and you don't know where the chicken is, and you need the transport to have the chicken or the egg in the supermarket, but you just don't know where to start. And the registry, the infrastructure is far down the road. I agree with you. There is a lot of capacity need in many, many countries, but I wouldn't start with building up registry, handling capacity, but with much more basic things.
Jacqueline, I think you have to have one of those, either the chicken or the egg, otherwise it doesn't work. Chandra.
Yeah. So I basically agree with the point that Ingo and Neil have been making, that the advantage in Carbon Market 2.0 is the fact that technology can enable your participation. That's the thing to understand. But I'd agree with Jacqueline that technology alone cannot solve the problem. Mm-hmm. You need to get your institutional arrangements in order. You need to understand what you're authorizing, what you're approving for the voluntary market, and the technology can enable you to access the markets in the way that I think Neil has described, and the linkages that the Climate Warehouse creates to the global marketplace. I think that's the way to look at it. That what has changed dramatically in the last 20 years since the CDM registry and the international transaction log is the development of technology and the connectedness and the software that's been developed, which allows you to access it in manner. And quite frankly, it's going to become even more decentralized and with tokenization and digital assets. And it'll make it easier, even more easy for you to do it. But as Jacqueline is saying, tokens for what? You have to create the carbon asset in order to do that. And that, I think, is an area where we have to work together, trying to use other initiatives of the World Bank, of the UNDP, of the KliK Foundation, its engagement with UNDP in putting together the transactions so that the technology can enable it or enable you to then benefit from it. By itself, everything is ready, the market is ready, but if the chicken or the egg doesn't show up, then Andrei can worry about which should have come first, but we won't have anything to sell.
But it's got to be one of those. So Giza, I think that the thing that you got to do is you got to make some choices, and part of the choices is, whether you're stuck into a thinking that you got to build. Listen, I ran an exchange that wanted to run the back office, the front office, the middle office, and meanwhile Richard Sandor had an exchange that had only the front office, had nothing else. And I tell you, he made a lot of money. So it really depends whether you want to build the whole thing yourself or you want to go out and kind of make use of bits and pieces of that existing out there. It's just outsourcing, call it in a simpler way. In many cases, it's outsourcing bits and pieces. But there are certain chickens or eggs that you have to have at home. Otherwise, there's nothing in the oven. I don't know. I mean, we're getting on a tangent. Go ahead, please. So sorry.
Hi, I've got the mic here. Sorry,
Okay.
but maybe the question can go next, if that's okay. Thanks. So, hi, panelists. Great session. Very much enjoyed hearing what everyone had to say about the needs to operationalize and maximize the use of Article 6. I guess the question that I've got is, what does a successful bond look like to you, and what would you like to get at the end of these 2 weeks?
First thing is, let's put some order and discipline, because I think, Rui, you had something to say.
Yes, so referring to my model 2 is really about how to move people into the Article 6 realm without having the need to go into complex technologies and all these things, is to tap on the existing infrastructure that we have, make some small modification, adjustment. Of course, making adjustment and modification is not going to be easy for everyone because everyone is very familiar with what they are currently doing, but everyone will have to make small changes here and there. Not just for voluntary carbon markets participants to make some changes to their registry system, but also for countries to set out clear policy framework, clear guidelines in terms of how it will work in the realm of NDC achievement. So these are things that we will have to put in place, but of course we should do it in a manner that it maximizes participation while minimizing costs. So the best way to do it is to share the pain together, where everyone work together to form an optimal arrangement. Although there might be some costs incurred in the short term, but most importantly is what are we achieving in the long run. So at least that's what we are seeing now. And I think we are not speaking very differently. I think all our models are actually the same. It's just that we use different terms. And in the negotiating rooms, I think most probably, hopefully by the end of bond, everyone will at least get a clear definition of what are the terms that have been used, and everyone kind of converge in the terms before we start talking about the various models. Yeah.
I think that's kind of, I agree, Rui. I think that we've been trying to talk the same language now for 40 years. I'm not sure. I think at some point somebody's going to take the lead, and everybody else they're going to understand what that person is saying or that particular initiative is saying, and will run with this. There's not huge differences I think everybody more or less can live with both models, because it's not a fixed model. It's variation, and it's at the limit. You move down, up and down an axis, but you can find solutions for whatever you want within those parameters. Probably the important part to come out of this session in Bonn is to have a supervisory board ready to go. It is becoming to be unacceptable. There are regional groups that cannot nominate people. We understand there are politics involved in this, and then regional deals and other bodies where people are getting nominated, and we understand all that, but there's also a lot of people waiting for these nominations to happen, and then now they've been 6 months since in Glasgow, so it's becoming a little bit untenuous to continue to argue that you need more time. There'll be a lot of pressure on people to do that in Bonn. There's a lady you have a microphone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Judith from the Infos Network. I just would like you to explain again this blockchain thing, because I'm not sure I understand it. I mean, normally it's a country who is responsible to collect this data. And you speak about that there is also this private sector would come into the picture somehow, that they would also do that. How do you, and then how the countries has to be sure that there is no double accounting? And how do you make sure that there is, this doesn't happen that you like the statements, but that all equal, but some animals are more equal than others. That in some countries there will be maybe a lot of registration because they are good in this technology, but some other ones are lacking behind. So
a few things. So thank you for the question. The registries that are participating are governments or independent standards. And they have the right to actually keep their data, sync into these tables. As you see here, the private sector comes in through the service layer. So obviously in blockchain itself, there's validation. So there's 200,000 computers that are holding the data set, just the hashes, to make sure that it's all secure. So if there's a change, they see that there is a change, and you can go back and
Neil,
track.
I think that's somebody is offering you a microphone, so you can actually stand up.
Sorry. It's, no, so there's, it's really, if you look at where the private sector comes in the system that the Climate Warehouse has, it's in the service layer. So there's trading, there's compliance reporting, there's observers. Right now, there's actually a live observer node that anyone can go to. So you go to theclimatewarehouse.org, and you can check in and look for the third simulation. Not all of the data is input yet, but you'll start to see some of the data that's coming in and how you can observe. So anyone can do that. But really, this is the most inclusive system without causing any damage. Any double claims or double entries will rise to the top. You'll see conflicts. We're starting to put in geospatial data for every project. We're opening up with all sorts of rights data that you'll start to see, so that you'll be able to know if there's a double claim on a project of any sort. So we are creating a system to protect and enable. And this is the World Bank's concept. We just helped build a system that worked with it using technologies that were honestly really, really great, but most blockchain has no idea what to do with itself. It's a really cool tech with nothing to go to, and a lot of it really hasn't gone to be more functional. By trying to solve this problem, we had to become more functional. And I would love to take all the time in the world to explain to you, but it is inclusive in the validation, but they are just holding the node, and they are just validators of the blockchain, and they do earn, from doing that, they earn fees in the system. But I'll explain it.
I tell you what, Neil, I spent an afternoon in Zurich before going to dinner with Misha explaining this stuff, and I think I understood about 80% of it. So the only offer, I think you should make an offer for an afternoon seminar explaining blockchain. I think you'll get half of the Substack coming here.
Anytime.
Anytime. Go ahead, please. You want to tell us who we are, please?
Hello, I'm Benya. I just graduated from the Master's Climate Studies. Thank you all for your presentations. I really liked that. And one of my takeaways is that a global decentralized registry is the way to go, right? So who's going to decide on that? Like, is that going to be a bond decision, or is the private sector going to do that? And if so, is there anything negative that you can think of? Like, what would be a downside of a decentralized registry where basically all different kinds of certificates can be uploaded, but then that would probably make room for low quality credits? If so, what are your thoughts on that?
You go ahead, Roy.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Maybe I go ahead first. Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah, maybe I go ahead first. Andrei can correct me because he's more experienced in Article 6 than me. But I think Article 6.2 already provides for a decentralized framework. So moving forward, or rather Article 6.2, Decision 2 of CMA3 actually provides a very broad guidelines on what's the criteria for being an ITMOS. However, I think individual countries will have to add on this guidance to come up with what is so-called the environmental integrity criteria to determine what are the credits that they will actually authorize to become an ITMOS. So that will actually form the basis of driving high quality carbon credits. That's one. And of course, Article 6 also put in place a review mechanism, and you need annual reporting, tracking, and all this. So it actually put in place some form of safeguards to at least check and balance. And moving on is that we also have climate warehouse initiative to ensure that the voluntary market as well as the Article 6 market actually align with each other, at least in the data, so that credits won't be double issued, double counted, or double claimed. But all in all, individual countries, companies, in fact, everyone that is using or generating carbon offsets have a responsibility to ensure that they are using high quality credits. And ultimately, carbon credits is a term that is so encompassing for all sorts of spectrum of quality out there. So I think that's where the individual comes into play. Individual stakeholder comes into play. Yeah.
Well, look, I would argue that it's, a blockchain is a framework on which you put information that has, in the view of many, it's a very safe and secure and flexible and centralized type of approach. But the information is there, is put in. The use of the credits, in the end, is a matter of the countries approving for that use. The fact that it goes on this blockchain doesn't mean that somebody's going to use what's there. So if you don't like what's in there, it's a bit like I don't want to call it those Japanese things that you eat and you pick something up from the tray. And if you don't like it, you don't take it. And if you take it and other people don't like, you're going to have to explain why you took it.
And just quick, I mean, the risk of a decentralized approach is that there's a lack of standards maybe and a lack of policing in the early days. No? But what you get through decentralization is a whole lot of experimentation. And I think, and the hope then is that basically that experimentation, there's a survival of the best, of the fittest solutions fit for purpose, plus maybe increasing amount of standardization and consensus. I think that this process will be driven by two things. Governments, national governments, who ultimately in this decentralized world sit behind the driving wheel to put in place standards and regulation and enforcement and policing. And that's going to be a slow process. And the hope is that best practice gets adopted. And ultimately, it's about adoption. The hope is that the fittest solution, the best solution for which there is best practice, are then those that get adopted by as many players as possible towards an integrated or like interoperational shared protocol. That would be ideal. Risks are that this is not happening, that we have fragmentation, and then the risk will be at the interface between different protocols that different players are using for that respective purpose. So that the friction is at the intersection. Our ability to standardize and to get everything into one protocol, right, is what I'd hope for, but there is no mechanism, I think, in place that would really drive that, no?
Do you want to answer this too? There's a gentleman at the, I think either you're waving or you want a microphone. So if we can get a microphone, but you go ahead first, Jacqueline.
Well, it's not the direct response to Ingo, but I just wanted to emphasize once again, we are talking about an important issue, the digital decentralized blockchain registry thing, whatever. But another important thing is not the question of digitalization. A simple point is there must be investment security. When I get an authorization today, I need to know that it remains for the next 10 years. And if the technical expert review comes only at some later stage, and there is always the risk that it can be revoked. And this is not investment security, and this is not conducive for business sector.
But now, Jacqueline, you're getting into contentious areas, because not all of us agree that the review has anything to do with quality. As in, some of us believe the review has to do with a checklist that is not a supervisory board. So careful.
What I want to emphasize is stability, reliability, and security is needed for business side.
So if I could just say, Andrei?
Yes.
Can I just say, I mean,
Can you give me a second, please, so I can... You have a microphone. Who has the microphone?
No, I don't have the microphone.
I have a microphone.
Okay, can you pass it on to the lady over there so she can pass it in the back?
But I have a question.
You have a question? Okay, then,
But since I
Neil...
already asked one, I would be happy to have somebody else.
So, Neil, why don't you, they play with the microphone to answer?
I gave him mine. So I'll just say the one thing I was going to say is that it's about transparency.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I've asked one, so.
It's okay, man, you can ask another one.
Okay.
Go ahead, Neil, and then you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's really about transparency, and that's really, at its base level, it's just surfacing everything that we're all talking about so that we know what is happening, and then the policies come true. I mean, some of what you're saying, it's really true, because you don't invest money if you don't know what the rules are or when it's going to have value. You're not going to buy a car if you don't know what it costs or if it's actually going to be delivered or anything, even if it's a smart car. So I think it's, we're all saying kind of the same thing. We're just trying to create tools that enable. So,
I think you're making these people very nervous with the microphone.
It's a very quick question, and it's sort of, it ties to what you were just briefly alluding to at the end, the stability and the security and so on. We are getting requests to issue authorization letters that specify the intent of the units and that implicitly state that we would never use for our own compliance purposes. Mm-hmm. So we're noticing intents to use the authorization letters as registries, sort of. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could all comment on it, particularly Switzerland, because you have bilateral agreements, if they include such things, such language, things of the sort. Thank you.
Let me first go to the gentleman in the back, because you have a microphone now?
I do.
Okay.
I'm happy for you to answer this question first, though, if you'd like.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, you might be able to combine. My name is Peters-Stanley, and I'm from the Australian government. I work on our support program for the Pacific. Apologies if this doesn't cover... I don't have a great deal of background in blockchain, and I'd certainly love a seminar if there was one going. My question is for those countries without a national registry. I see that that's sort of a critical part of this process. Can a decentralized system cover them, or how do you sort of get countries without that, chicken or egg aspect I think you were talking about before, actually contribute into it?
You ask Kate Hancock. Can we go in some order? Go ahead, please.
The authorization question, there is language in the bilateral agreements, and there is talking language between the two governments we are working with two countries. And if you want to go more into detail, I suggest we meet us bilaterally afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to add something to this?
I would just say on the... sorry.
Leave it on the desk.
I think on the authorization, I think what's going to come out of this process, I don't know, is this working? I can scream. No idea. I'm the tech guy. Sorry. So on the authorization, we will be creating, we've been asked to help and using some technology to not necessarily blockchain technology, But there are ways to create evaluation tools that I think are really important for countries to have, because like under Kyoto, you don't want to start selling at this price point, and then we see that when at some point you do need to have abatement, that you're going to be at a much higher point of the curve. So I think it's really important that there's a little bit of a pause and pressure on that, and that countries have the ability to properly evaluate what their costs will be, and is that corresponding adjustment going to bring recycled money into your economy? Is it creating sustainable development, like progress? Are you getting reductions in poverty or hunger? Are you getting better cities? Are things happening because of this? And we're trying to work with parties to create those tools, because those tools can enable the decisions to be made more fairly. And without that, nobody wants to see a system that isn't working that way. I think Carbon 1.0 was all about tons. It was all about carbon. I don't think we recognized at that point how critical sustainability is. And carbon without sustainability it becomes irrelevant at some point, unfortunately. We need to have them interconnected, and I think that's one of the recognitions of Carbon 2.0. And so I would hope that countries that are doing this recognize that and have the time to get the proper tools to evaluate and to participate in that way. And I understand private sector's desire. I've been on that side to do that, but I think it needs to be, for all parties, done fairly.
Just very quickly, I think the starting point for your decision to issue an authorization letter must be your own NDC. No? And then from that NDC, any investor, view yourself first, but any investor should also see what is your unconditional ambition level in what sectors. Now, the more detailed an NDC is, the easier it is to assess where is room for issuing authorization letters. If there's a project, a large-scale solar project that's non-additional that you have covered in your NDC, clearly no authorization letter. If it's a project about something highly innovative that you don't even talk about in your NDC, then why not issue an authorization letter, because it's surplus to your NDC. But I think to have good detailed NDC is a real good readiness activity before getting into market.
I think these are, for order of good discipline, the World Bank has got a number of documents on this website detailing. I work on some, but many others have worked on many more than me. But there are documents kind of at least giving an indication on the steps and the things that you need to consider before going that, looking at the MAC curve, looking at this, that, and the other things. So there are things that need to be done in a certain order before you put your John Hancock on that in order to export, to authorize an ITMA, which implies a corresponding adjustment, which implies some explanation to your boss. So, yeah, let me go to the gentleman behind there.
You didn't answer the question in the back.
Okay, let me take this question now, and then we'll come back to you.
It's more sharing a story. I'm representing here Youth and Green in Egypt, and at the beginning of the year, we heard a lot of things from the government. They wanted to issue certificates especially for Sharm el-Sheikh, the Ministry of Tourism of Egypt. And that was the question. Here as a private sector, we started our journey to research what kind of tools we should use, and the 3 steps and so on, of course, measuring and what kind of measurement we do, what kind of software. Our let's say, outcome or takeaway, we lack standardization and we lack leadership. And the Minister of Tourism, for example, they wanted to have an ownership for a regulatory framework, and we started to develop that. We developed that, but when it came later, okay, what kind of software tools? We approached a couple of companies in Europe and in US. Okay, could be nationalized? No. That was an open question. What should we do later on? And then the third question comes here for us. Okay, if we do this, is it going to be scope 1, 2, and 3? If this is required within 1 year? So also time frame, please consider when it's going to take place. So I'd like afterwards, of course, to speak to Neil, and we could really take part in this experimentation. But nationalization or decentralization is something really we should count on, because all of the available tools for calculations and for certifications, also we don't have projects in Egypt, for example, to certify or to compensate for. That's also another thing. It's not fair. I don't know why some products or companies, you need to issue certificates while they compensated somewhere else. So this is also should be considered, I would say so. Thanks.
Thank you. Neil, did you want to answer the gentleman at the back? There's your microphone.
Yeah, just as regarding developing world, countries or countries that don't have registries yet, actually the climate warehouse was built with what's called an auxiliary app. And that is a very basic registry that will work right now. In addition, Chia was asked, Costa Rica has, as often as the leader in many things in the climate, and they have been building out a really robust system of metrics and internal actions, and then an evaluation tool, and then a connection to the Climate Warehouse. Chia is their partner in helping them make this a open source tool for other countries to use. So there are systems being developed that will continue to make this better and will be in sync with the ecosystem that is being created through the Climate Warehouse. Again, this is just all connecting the pieces. This is just, it's not a registry. It is metadata. It is the ability for the registries to connect and see what the truth is. It's like a huge dashboard that enables the parties to work well together to achieve these goals.
And also just to the colleague from Australia, you can basically issue an authorization for a future ITMO transfer without a national registry. Because the national registry, all of the readiness stuff in Article 6.2 initial report requirement is just preconditions to transfer, not to authorization. So you can start earlier. And in terms of a national registry, it's not the technology is not the problem. I think especially for government interventions, I think is working towards getting a regulatory mandate. That is a critical part, like some kind of legislative act by the competent authority to assign responsibility in relation to the operation of a national registry to someone. And then figuring out the technology solution around that, that's a trivial part.
Okay, you may have noticed there's been a change in the moderator, quite unexpected. We have a couple more minutes. I don't see any, I do see one more question from the floor. And it will be the last round of questions.
I have this question to the KliK Foundation and maybe to all of you. This about that when you are from Switzerland, there are some companies who are buying these credits, and you mentioned something that there was also some national and international. I mean, I think there is a danger that instead of Swiss companies would be more efficient or using decreasing the carbon emission in Switzerland, then they're going out. Do you see any danger of that one, that they are buying credits in Ghana instead of decreasing the emission in Switzerland? And do you have some kind of thing that you mentioned? I think that in the beginning you started national, these credits, and then you will say later on you have these bilateral agreements.
I'm not sure whether you might be talking about voluntary markets now, touching upon voluntary market with your question. I speak for KliK Foundation, who has the obligation to compensate on behalf of the mineral oil companies. And we have to submit these attestations to the Swiss authorities. So we could do this within Switzerland within the last 7 years, in Switzerland only, and we can do it now elsewhere. But I don't. There's no risk that other companies other companies have their reasons to buy credits. They are not obliged by law as we are, so I cannot talk on behalf of them. For us, I don't see a risk and I don't see a competition. On the contrary, we try to do our best within Switzerland and we want to increase our ambition. Switzerland wants to increase an ambition, therefore we go to go abroad now. This is a decision by Swiss population, and we just follow the orders of the sovereign.
Okay, I think time is up. Does any of the speaker want to make any quick final remark? Otherwise, we can close.
I think we're all in sync. I think everybody.
Worn out.
I honestly think that the panel is incredibly in sync. I think that we all kind of are on the same page, and we would like to see less politics and just more action and more agreement. It's a crisis. We're here because of that.
More deals after the agreement.
What's that?
More deals after the agreement.
100% more deals. We need the infrastructure to do the deals, and we need to make sure all parties are getting the right. Absolutely.
It's been a terrific discussion. Please join me and thank the speakers with a round of applause. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your attention.